Texas-sized sea change for the GOP in the Lone Star State. J.D. Vance drops the hammer on taxpayer theft, and Democrats at it again in the courts since they can't win at the ballot box. It's Wednesday, May 27th, and this is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Hello and welcome in to Heartlander News. I'm Krista Gall. Now, you're seeing and hearing a lot about the GOP and Trump and the primaries last night, etc., all in an attempt to distract you from what is true. The Democrats have absolutely no message. And what they are saying, by the way, most American voters aren't excited about their return to power in the least. I'll get to the results in Texas in just a bit. But first, let's consider where the Democrats are today. Their shining star in New York City, Mayor Mamdani.
When necessary, we will take aggressive legal action to remove negligent owners and property managers. And for buildings that have suffered chronic neglect, we will work to transfer ownership to responsible stewards. Stewards that include community land trusts, nonprofits, or even the tenants themselves.
Yes, you heard that right. Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, is telling a cheering crowd that we may, as the government, just transfer ownership to responsible people if we don't like the way owners of certain buildings, condos, what have you. If we don't like the way they're conducting themselves, we may just transfer ownership to, say, the tenants themselves. Yeah. You know, Democrats have presided over many different disasters. This would be just the latest inculcation. In fact, 4 of them come to mind, driven entirely by Democrat leadership and policies, and it's done more damage to this country than most of us realize. This would be yet another nail in the coffin. I think most Americans notice it, but these 4 particular disasters that I have in mind, they weren't random events or unavoidable crises. They're very similar to what Mr. Mamdani is proposing. They were choices driven by fear, control, and ideology that burned through trillions of dollars and tore the country apart in the meantime, destroyed trust in institutions, and left scars that will last generations. Let's start with the man-made climate change lie from Al Gore and his stupid movie, An Inconvenient Truth. We were told that the planet was on the brink, that the ice caps were melting, that cities were underwater, monster storms, all supposed to devastate us, certainly by now. Gore's hysterical predictions didn't happen, though. But that hasn't stopped leftists from pretending coastal flooding and melting ice caps happened anyway. The hysteria caused trillions of dollars to be wasted and stolen. It choked worldwide efforts to pass regulations and produced green subsidies that helped nobody except line the pockets of a few, as well as create energy policies that drove up costs for families and factories. Thankfully, Lee Zeldin and President Trump are taking an axe to those at present. We'll get into that in more detail in just a minute. Developing countries got squeezed out of cheap power. Americans paid through the nose for something they didn't want or even need. And anyone who pushed back as a denier, oh yeah, you were shut out of the conversation. The result, massive economic disruption, and far less to show for it than promised, as always. Next, Obamacare. The law grabbed control of 1/6 of the entire economy. It was the biggest regulatory explosion in modern history. They sold it as the fix for rising costs and unfair access. Remember, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Remember that? Well, that was a grand lie, of course, and we knew it at the time. Premiums shot up for most people. Choices shrank. Millions lost coverage that they actually liked. Small business took the biggest hits of all in that mess. The individual mandate, it forced you to buy plans or pay up. Healthcare spending kept climbing instead of bending the cost curve down as promised. What started as a promise of compassion turned into a bloated, centralized mess that still burdens taxpayers today. Then came Russia collusion. It began as a Clinton campaign fiction to smear candidate Trump, and it exploded into years of investigations, media slanders, and deep state abuses of power. They claimed that Trump was a Russian asset who stole the election. FISA abuses, leaks, the Mueller probe, it became the most elaborate character assassination in history. And of course, there was no conspiracy between Trump and Russia. We know that now, but the damage was done. A legitimate presidency undermined on day one. Billions wasted. Millions of Americans painted as traitors just for voting the wrong way. It broke trust in elections, intelligence agencies, and the press. And that's not all bad. At least we found out the depth of corruption of our government and their media accomplices at times. Finally, Biden's COVID response comes to mind. The lockdowns, the mandates, the ever-changing story on masks, origins, and, of course, the mandatory shots to keep your job. The virus was real. It was deadly for many, but the cover-up of its origin was more evidence of massive corruption, and Biden's policies had nothing to do with science. Schools and businesses closed for extended periods and destroyed educations and livelihoods. Churches were locked down. Liquor stores, though, they could stay open. Jobs vanished, and those that stayed left offices empty, catering to largely large big box stores, and many commercial office markets just collapsed. Kids fell years behind in school. Mental health problems spiked. Inflation and supply chains broke entirely. And it hit everyday families the hardest. We're still living through it now, I'm convinced. Dissenting doctors and data, of course, and talk show hosts got censored. And that was part of the FBI scandal. And the government running social media companies for the benefit of Democrats, that was huge. And thankfully, it was uncovered by the likes of people like Senator Eric Schmidt. Those COVID mandates cost livelihoods for those who refused. Public faith in health authorities took a beating that hasn't recovered since. Those 4 episodes alone, add something like Mamdani is proposing, they all have one thing in common. The same political force reaching for more power through fear and top-down control. The money wasted, staggering. The division and lost trust may be even worse. A whole generation is paying the price in debt, opportunity, and cynicism. The first step out of this is pretty simple. Calling disasters what they were. Let's be honest about it. Democrat authoritarianism or totalitarianism, whichever you prefer, take your pick. But that's what we're seeing. Thank goodness these same people weren't successful in destroying President Trump's life or his presidencies this time. We are on notice as Americans, though. You can't give power back to the Democrat Party. Its history is one disaster after another. And if you listen to Mr. Mamdani, he's promising to bring more of the same. Meanwhile, it was a big, big night in Texas last night. Let's go right to it. Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, defeats the sitting senator, the long-term incumbent sitting Senator John Cornyn, in what is considered nothing short of a massive, massive upset. Let's go to the tape, number 149, to kick it off.
Then there's one person who I think you might know. President Donald J. Trump. When everyone in Washington told him to abandon me and abandon the people of Texas, he didn't listen. Instead, he gave his complete and total endorsement. President Trump is the leader of our party, and his endorsement in this is the most powerful force in politics. And I'm honored to have his support, and I look forward to working with him in the Senate to deliver for Texas. Tonight, we just sent a Texas-sized message to Washington. I said it in March, and I'll say it again now. Today, change was on the ballot. Change won. Let me be clear, this is not just my win, this is your win. We just proved that this Senate seat doesn't belong to Washington. It belongs to you, the hardworking men and women of this state. We went up against $150 million in all the attacks in the world, and you know what happened? The voters declared loud and clear a simple truth that we know in our hearts and in our souls: Texas is not for sale.
Meanwhile, back to Paxton, who put on quite a comedy routine. Look, the striking dichotomy between him and this James Talarico, it's you're not going to have a clearer pair of opposites than Talarico versus Paxton, and Paxton laid that out in number 150 here.
My opponent is the most extreme radical the Democrats have ever nominated. He's even running a vegan campaign, whatever that is. He goes by a few names that you may all have heard of. Some people know him as Tofu Talarico. Some people call him Six-Gender Jimmy. I've even heard some people call him James Talarico. And others refer to him simply as Low T Talarico.
Well, they call him Six-Gender Jimmy. I kind of like that. He did say that. Just so you know, this is a guy that pretends to be a pastor. James Talarico, the Democrat in Texas. I mean, a really dangerous guy, again, wrapped in the cloth. Listen to just some of his points of view on, say, abortion. He'd have you believe that the Son of God is really ambivalent when it comes to taking the life of a baby in the womb. Give me number 151, just so you remember where we are here with Democrats in Texas.
I trust Texas women to make decisions about their own bodies, to shape their own destinies in consultation with their family members, their doctors, their faith leaders. I don't believe that's a place for government. I don't believe it's a place for politicians. I don't believe it's a place for the state. And that's a belief I hold not despite my faith, but because of my faith. Jesus never talks about abortion. The Bible is silent on abortion. And when that happens with a social issue as important as abortion, we Christians have to take Scripture as a whole, and we've got to try to make some kind of ethical determination. Right now in Texas, we have the most extreme abortion ban in the country. No exception for rape, no exception for incest. We have girls as young as 10 years old who are assaulted, who are raped, who are victims of incest, and who can't access basic reproductive care, who aren't able to make the decision about whether or not they are going to create. And again, just my personal belief is that we have to give women and girls the freedom to make this decision as moral agents, as our sisters in Christ. And I'm not saying that's an easy decision to come to, but that's where I've arrived.
You know, as a Christian, I'm going to let God sort out his dealings with the pastor Talarico there. But as for the idea that Jesus has nothing to say about the issue, as Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders aptly posted yesterday, and I reposted on X, Jeremiah 1:5, just for those of you that ever come across this and don't necessarily know how to answer it, it's worth your time to go to Jeremiah 1:5, quote, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." The word of God, it's in there. So this idea that there's ambivalence in Scripture about life from the pastor, it's just wrong. And Sarah Sanders says the God of the universe undeniably values life at all stages, and it's disgusting for Talarico to imply otherwise. It is disgusting, and it's even more disgusting that this is a guy that supposedly shepherds a flock of any kind. Nevertheless, there are Republicans, particularly Cornyn-supporting Republicans, who still think that Paxton is the more objectionable figure. Like over at the Wall Street Journal. I'm sorry to say, but probably not surprised to say, Republican voters in Texas, their editorial board writes today, chose Ken Paxton as their Senate nominee, and now they can spend $100 million or more trying to salvage the seat and keep their Senate majority in November. So the Wall Street Journal, and I'm hearing this from a lot of establishment Republicans now, are convinced that because Ken Paxton has had some whatever difficulties or problems in the past, because he's now the nominee and Texas Republican primary voters chose him, and he is not the Beltway, he is not the Wall Street Journal, he is not the establishment Republican pick, and Cornyn was and Cornyn lost. Well, that means now Talarico is going to come on and Texans are going to hardcore flip for him because Paxton apparently has some kind of trouble in the past. I mean, here again, if Texas elects that guy in particular, Beto with a Bible, as I like to call him, then Texas is gone, far more gone than we could have ever understood. In fact, there's a story today in Axios, and they're very hopeful about this. America's fastest growing religious group is also one of the hardest and costliest to reach, the nuns. Religiously unaffiliated Americans now make up a large and growing share of the electorate. But without church-based networks, they're significantly more expensive for campaigns to reach and mobilize. Nuns are geographically, and that is N-O-N-E-S, not nuns like habit-wearing Catholic nuns. Nuns are generally socially dispersed as well as geographically. Campaigns must rely on costly digital ads, canvassing, and persuasion to reach them. A record 29% of Americans now identify as religiously unaffiliated, the largest single religious cohort, surpassing Catholics and evangelical Protestants. Among Gen Z, it's even higher. Roughly 4 in 10 adults age 18 to 29 are unaffiliated, according to Public Religion Research Institute. And about 1/3 of Democrats and independents identify as non-religious versus 13%. Now, 1/3 of Democrats identifying as non-religious versus those who say they are not affiliated with a particular faith group, that's different. That's entirely different. And Axios is trying to blend and blur those lines. When someone says they are not affiliated, the nuns, religiously unaffiliated, that means you'll ask someone, hey, do you believe in a creator? Do you believe in God? And I know people like this. Maybe you're one of those, and I'm not picking on you if you are, but maybe you're one of those people that says, oh yeah, I believe in God. I just don't like, quote, organized religion or what have you. And all I would encourage you to do on that front is just read scripture on that. Not that I'm stumping for any particular organized religion, but being in a body of believers and worshiping, it is scriptural and it is important. So I'll just say that as a Christian, where you choose to go or how you choose to worship, that's obviously, God bless America, that's your freedom of choice. But the idea that you just don't have to participate in any way, I think is a flawed way to think about Christian faith, and it's certainly backed up by Scripture. But setting that aside for a minute, to say you don't go to church but you still believe in God is one thing. To say, as Democrats, 1/3 of them, according to this survey from Pew, to say 1/3 of Democrats just don't identify as religious at all, they're non-religious. Well, that's a different story. And now the question is, in Texas, how many non-religious people are there? So even if you don't identify as someone who is part of a particular religious group, but you still are a believer in a creator, do you think Talarico makes sense? I don't. If you truly believe in a creator, if you say you're a Christian or a believer, but you just don't go to church, I still think Talarico's a turnoff. And Axios is hoping that people who don't go to church but still call themselves religious but just don't attend a worship service, that's the same as Democrats who outright reject God, literally out of their party platform, and say things like Talarico said, that Jesus has nothing to say about abortion. You see how they're trying to blend and muddy this? And as I warned you, and I'm sorry to beat a dead horse here, those of you that have become viewers of this show, and I'm grateful that you listen and watch, but this is going on in Kansas too. And you're going to see it with a pastor who leads a United Methodist church, a big one in the Midwest, named Adam Hamilton. He's running as a Democrat. He's probably not going to say something as overt as Talarico, but it is this new entree into the Democrat Party, the pastor pretending to be sort of Jesus adjacent, but still embrace the Democrat Party platform. I don't believe it works as long as this is still a nation of believers, and it still very much is a nation of believers, overwhelmingly so, even if they don't attend church worship. Anyway, back to this Wall Street Journal piece for a minute, because again, rather than focus on what I just focused on, the real danger, the wolves in sheep's clothing, the camel's nose under the tent, the Democrat pastor, now the Wall Street Journal thinks Ken Paxton is a bigger problem. Mr. Paxton, they write, represents the serrated edge of the Texas GOP, for which owning the libs is the highest political value. He's a conservative culture warrior on gender and race. Oh, no, that's awful. You can't be a culture warrior as a Republican. The Wall Street Journal has distaste for that. Their monocle got fogged. But when it comes to economics, he's staked out a record of anti-business populism that is little different from that of progressive Democrats. Right. And you know what they cite? They cite him cracking down on food dyes in Skittles, M&Ms, and Kellogg's, Fruit Loops. Well, that's the same thing that RFK Jr. and the, the Maha movement have targeted. And I will tell you this, some of the most strident conservative moms that I know, Trump voting moms that I know, love the Maha movement. They love what RFK Jr. is doing. That's a winning issue. So the Wall Street Journal can malign him for tackling big food on preservatives and additives and things like that, but they need to read the room, because that's really not a Democrat-Republican thing. That is a Maha thing, Make America Healthy Again thing. That doesn't really have a party affiliation. So the Wall Street Journal's missing that. Then they go on to criticize Paxton for hiring a guy who has sued BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street and accused them of buying coal companies, shares in coal companies, to advance a green agenda. And again, this is the Wall Street Journal. Now, these are supposed to be thoughtful, smart people, right? And they snarkily say that Paxton and an attorney that he hired, who have tackled these big investment firms for investing in coal, he says they invested in the CO2 heavy fuel to serve the climate change cause. Ha, ha, ha. So what am I saying here? Paxton is correct, and this guy that he hired, this Tony Busby, when they went after BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, investing in coal, you invest in these firms to control them. Everybody understands that. It's exactly what small-town lenders are going through right now. That's what ESG was all about. Environmental social governance. Is the Wall Street Journal pretending like we didn't just go through that era, like we don't know that's going on? It's going on now, less so under President Trump, thank God. But certainly during the Biden era, and it was introduced during the Obama era, the whole concept being these big left-wing monopolistic firms like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street would buy huge swaths of the economy or control the lending of banks. And certainly control the means of production. So again, it's not an outright takeover, but you invest enough in a company, and then all of a sudden you have a lot to say about how they operate and who they do business with. And ESG was one of the most toxic, corrosive, anti-business things that we've ever been through as a country. And you talk to people who run businesses, big and small, and they will tell you if there's a chain involved in the business they do. So I don't know. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I sell ice cream, and I got to buy my ice cream cones from someone. And then the ice cream cone maker has to have those ice cream cones wrapped by someone else. Well, I, as the ice cream store, my bank may not lend to me courtesy of ESG standards if somewhere in that chain of the cone, like the guy that wraps the ice cream cones, that I get delivered to me, he uses, I don't know, non-green friendly wrapping paper, or creates the wrapping paper for the cones in a non-eco-friendly way. Well, an investment firm or a big bank can tell me as an ice cream shop that I'm in violation, or I can't do business, or I've got to find a new supplier for my cones because the people that get the cones to me, who wrap the paper, sell to the cones, the cone guy sells to me. It's 2 spots removed from my business, but small lenders can still muscle me as the shop owner to break that chain and go shop somewhere else with an eco-friendly cone wrapper. You see what I'm saying? That's ESG. And so for the Wall Street Journal to act like it's laughable that BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street invested in coal companies to control them, it's not only not laughable, it's deadly serious. And shame on them for suggesting it's mock-worthy or something. It's a very serious threat. There's more, writes the Wall Street Journal. And the suits and other Paxton positions will create a dilemma for many Republican and independent voters in the autumn. Do they hold their nose and vote for Mr. Paxton, stay home, or cross the aisle and vote for Talarico? The Democrat is no moderate, they must confess. He favors high taxes on income, capital gains, and corporations, and on and on and on. Mr. Cornyn would have united the GOP against Mr. Talarico. You see, even though they admit the guy is rotten to the core on all the issues and to boot a fraudulent man of the cloth, they think the old establishment guy that was just rejected 70-30 last night in Texas, they think he would have been better to unite the GOP. What the hell sense does that make? How do you even say that out loud? How do you write that? John Cornyn, who lost devastatingly in his own Republican primary last night, would have been better suited to unite the GOP against the wacko radical pastor? What a position to take. The AG's primary victory means the Texas Senate seat is in play, and along with it, control of the United States Senate in the next Congress. Republicans will have to spend money to save Mr. Paxton. They wouldn't have, of course, I guess the Wall Street Journal concludes, if John Cornyn had won, because everyone in Republican politics in Texas would have just fallen in line and elected John Cornyn, even though they overwhelmingly said last night they're not excited about him. Very, very frustrating, to put it mildly. Also, one other note out of the Texas primaries yesterday that is interesting, to say the least. State Senator Mays Middleton of Galveston defeated Chip Roy in the GOP runoff for Texas Attorney General Tuesday night. Middleton successfully cast himself as the MAGA candidate, even as President Trump stayed out of this race. He'll face Senator Nathan Johnson out of Dallas, who won the Democrat runoff. So that's the race to replace Mr. Paxton, and Chip Roy lost it. And Middleton, incidentally, because Trump did not get involved in this, Middleton was able to frame Chip Roy as anti-Trump. Middleton dubbed himself as MAGA Mays, hammered Roy over his condemnation of Trump following the January 6th, 2021 Capitol riot. Roy promoted himself as a founder of the Sharia Free America caucus. Not a bad position, but apparently did not work. And I tell you what, if you appear anti-Trump in these Republican primaries and you're able to be framed as such, it's obviously pretty devastating. And Trump continues to remain 100% so far in his endorsements in this primary cycle. Just quickly on Democrats for a minute, there is a guy in Pennsylvania who likely will try to be the next president. He is Josh Shapiro, the current governor of Pennsylvania. And while he's trying to probably maneuver to become the nominee for the Democrats, he's also trying to run those out of the party that he doesn't like, including his own senator in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. Take a listen to this in 145. It's just noteworthy. He's throwing one of his senators, one of his own party, under the bus. A Jew, by the way, just so you know. Josh Shapiro, Jewish. And John Fetterman, the only Democrat in the entire Democrat caucus on Capitol Hill that's supportive of Israel. And by the way, this is also a governor who just had his home torched by an anti-Semite. But mind you, this is where the Democrats are training their fire.
When was the last time you saw him in PA at an event, Senator Fetterman?
I mean, probably years.
Years, yeah. Like just elected.
And I'm not saying he hasn't been at one, but I haven't seen him, and I'm at most things.
You get around a bit.
Yeah.
So he was elected in 22. So you probably last saw him at an event the year after he was elected, 23 here.
Yeah, I mean, I could check if you need a specific date.
But just top of mind, you can't recall seeing him.
I can't.
That's extraordinary, Governor.
I mean, that's a question you should ask him.
I have. I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago. You may have noticed. He hasn't come to events with the sitting governor of the state when he's the senior senator of the state.
Again,
yeah,
I think that's more of a question for him than me.
So Politico is, I guess, trying to help little Josh along there. He's playing coy, eating pizza or whatever, but they're really doing their best to try to run John Fetterman out of the Democrat Party. His chief of staff resigned last week, as I understand it. So that's the state of the Democrat Party. Running the one guy who is not an anti-Semite out. That tells you all you need to know. Look, the Democrats, whatever. I mean, Zoran Mamdani, that crap. James Talarico, Beto with a Bible. That's the Democrat offering, to my point, in the open. You know, you can puff yourself up at the Wall Street Journal and talk about Paxton versus Cornyn all you like, but the option, the alternative, is nothing I want for this country. It's nothing the Wall Street Journal editorial board should want for this country, I would think. And to continue to assert that there's any Republican in any race right now that's worthy of more scrutiny than what the Democrats are proposing is coming, that's outrageous to me. Democrats, this from Fox News, you know, Memorial Day weekend. Hope you took some time. I was able to attend a Memorial Day service. Memorial Day very specifically, and in fact, sort of depressingly, Jesse Waters did one of his man on the street segments. We'll play for you in just a minute. Going out to the beach, I think in California, and just asking people what Memorial Day was all about. It's sad how few people, particularly young people, even know what it is. But multiple Democrats have condemned their own party in a rare moment of sanity. The DNC Monday put out an attack post for Memorial Day because, of course, they did. The post read, "Today we honor the American heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice in Trump's war with Iran." The image included photos of the fallen soldiers and another reference to Trump's war. The DNC posted a different Memorial Day tribute later in the day that read, "This Memorial Day we remember and honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice to protect our country and defend our freedoms." The Department of War called out the Democrats' post. Rick Scott accused Democrats of using fallen soldiers as political props. Even Tammy Duckworth of Illinois said it is incredibly distasteful to use our heroic war dead as a political attack on Memorial Day. I'm a Democrat. I condemn this post by the DNC. An Army Ranger, Democrat Colorado, Jason Crow, said, "If we want the moral high ground, we have to be better. I fought for our country and served with those who made the ultimate sacrifice. It's wrong to politicize this day. I won't hesitate to call out my own team when we fall short." All right, so there's two. That's good. But what is Memorial Day? A lot of people don't really know, as proven by Jesse Waters' team out there on the beach over the weekend. Watch.
How are you celebrating the holiday on Monday?
At the beach. What's the... Oh, it's Memorial Day.
What is Memorial Day?
Memorial Day it's America's birthday.
That's a good question.
It's for our fallen brothers and sisters.
You know, I'm not exactly, I thought it was Veterans Day. Gosh.
Who did America fight in the Revolutionary War?
Dial that in. You got that. France. We fought ourselves.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
Revolutionary War. It's not Britain.
Britain.
I mean, if you probably give me a couple hints, I'd probably know what it is.
King and Queen.
Oh, man, you got me, bro.
Come on, man.
Who won the Civil War?
We took an edible before this. I think I need to leave this. The North.
Wait, us, right?
What were they fighting over in the Civil War?
Was it something that was very popular at around that time?
For sure.
Or is it still around in this time?
Look, I suppose that we've always had a faction of the electorate that's disengaged, but you'd love to ask the educational background of a lot of those folks. Here's what I'll bet. None of those young people were homeschooled. That's just a hunch. A good number of them, I'm sure, did not go to private Christian schools or micro schools or any of the new educational alternatives that exist out there. And that's on purpose. People being left in the dark about our history is actually on purpose. That suits the Democrats well. And it's how guys like Zoran Mamdani get elected, ultimately, because they don't understand history in any way. They haven't studied it, and they don't understand the looming disasters of what we've already been through, courtesy of Democrats. Meanwhile, shifting a little bit here to some political news, Margaret Brennan over the weekend on CNN, just very, very sullen. Give me number 140 here, as she can almost barely contain her tears as she reflects on this 250th anniversary of the country. She has a couple of Medal of Honor recipients there, and thankfully these guys who are the most noble of all of us and Medal of Honor recipients, they're not having any of Margaret Brennan's nonsense. Listen.
Are coming up on this 250th anniversary of the American experience. What specifically makes you optimistic? Because this country at times can feel dark these days. There's a lot of darkness. What makes you feel optimistic?
Well, ultimately, because we're in Washington, D.C., and everything revolves around politics, we have to remember that politics aren't everything. American lives continue on. Children are born, children go to school, lives are achieved, dreams are achieved. This country is a great place. It's not politics. It's not just what's the news bites coming off of media. Ultimately, we continue forward as a country, continually imperfect, continually evolving forward, always trying to achieve a more perfect union. That's what's important to remember, what we can achieve aspirationally. No other place in history, time, or on this planet have ever gotten to where we are today. We need to be proud of that, and we need to remember that is what we stay focused on, what we can be.
What we can be, and the promise of it. What makes you optimistic?
It's so important to remember who we are as a country and take an opportunity to celebrate that and think about all the challenges that we've overcome, how far we've actually come. I think if you frame it that way, you think very deeply about our trials and tribulations from beginning to today. We've made tremendous strides. Our country is, we're a global superpower. Our economy is doing well. All those things are great. And take politics aside, out of this whole conversation. Be grateful for what you've got and the opportunities that it's provided for you. And if you do that, I don't see how you can't be optimistic about our future.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you both. And thank you for your service.
Yeah. See, Margaret can't get out of the Beltway. Margaret won't. She needs to come to America's Heartland. That's why we do the Heartlander, and that's why we do it from America's Heartland, because people like Margaret, they don't get out of their own bubble. In her world, in her mind, in Washington, D.C., in that press corps, it's 24/7 Trump hatred. 24/7. They wake up, they discuss, they eat, they breathe, they drink over, they fall asleep thinking about Donald Trump and their hatred for all who voted for him, and their wish and desire that the Democrats, who are completely out of power right now, could ascend. And until that day, they're brought to near tears. They're convinced that the entire country has been hijacked. If they just get out and experience the Heartland, for instance, and travel around, she'd see what those Medal of Honor recipients just said. She'd see whole communities that don't give a whit about her or, frankly, what's going on in Washington, D.C. at all. George Will, who I don't typically quote anymore because he's also kind of become a Trump derangement guy, but back in the day, I once interviewed him, and he made a great point. He said there was once a time in this country where we would go weeks and weeks, maybe months, without hearing from the president or anyone in Washington, D.C. Americans have always been better off when their government is sight unseen, quite frankly. Number one, not bothering them, but also not making news and a daily digestible format of whatever's going on in Washington, D.C. wasn't the norm here. Everyone studied history. Everybody understood and studied civics, but then they went about their lives. Politics weren't people's lives. Politics for people like Margaret Brennan, it is her life. And that's why she's brought to near tears. These Medal of Honor recipients, on the other hand, they understand who is leading real lives out there. Number one, they are, and what they fought to represent and potentially give their lives for is not for Margaret Brennan exclusively to obsess over politics. Yeah, she's included in it. But it's about the people in small town America who are helping their friends and neighbors, who are starting stores, who are starting businesses, young people who are going off to trade school instead of college, county commissioners who are trying to figure out how to revive their town squares, farmers trying to get by. These are not people that are thinking every day about Washington, D.C., or Trump, or Democrats. They're not. Now, Democrat policies and overreach and regulations that are making their lives harder, they're thinking about that, and that makes them mad. But less government and less Washington and hearing less from Washington, D.C., I can say from America's heartland, that's a good thing. People here are heading to the lake, and they're fishing, and they're celebrating America's 250th birthday on the 4th of July, and they just fell silent on Monday and put the flags at half-staff and remembered those who gave their lives in the ultimate sacrifice for the country. Town parades and picnics and church services. There's still so much wholesome goodness. Church services on Sunday. There's so much good going on in much of this country, not just America's heartland. I'd still say most. But people like Margaret Brennan never get out of Washington, D.C. to experience it, and they should. She'd be a little less weepy. She'd feel a lot better and more optimistic about America, who it is, who it's always been, and who it still is. Vice President Vance and the team he's assembled give me optimism. He's touted up to $160 billion recovered from fraudsters by the feds. This should make one smile, not cry. This is exactly what you'd want your government to do, isn't it? J.D. Vance claiming yesterday the Trump administration's anti-fraud task force has worked to recover as much as $160 billion in fraudulent small business loans, COVID-19 relief, and student aid. Let's go to the tape. Some from Vice President Vance yesterday, number 141.
Not victimless crimes. Sometimes the most vulnerable people in our community are the ones who suffer when we don't take fraud seriously. One of the cases that was part of Colin's series of indictments last week in Minnesota stood out to me, and I think highlights how particularly egregious some of these fraudsters can be. And it's a man who was supposed to be providing services to allow elderly people to live full and independent lives. And what happened instead is that the man who was supposed to provide these services, reimbursed by the Medicaid program, was providing nothing. No services, no help, no check-ins, and the very man, the vulnerable elderly man that he was supposed to be protecting and looking after, was reimbursed by the taxpayer in order to do exactly that. That man died. One day before he died, after months of being neglected by the caretaker who was getting reimbursed by the American people, one day before he died, he submitted his final reimbursement for services he never provided for a man he never cared for. And that man lived his final moments on this earth neglected while a fraudster got rich by providing services that he never actually provided. That's what we're trying to stop, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we have to fight back against. It's a shame that anything like that happens. But if it does happen, the only way to protect those people and the only way to protect the American taxpayer is to ensure that the fraudsters go to prison and that they stop this ridiculous scam on the American people.
This is a home run issue from J.D. Vance and the White House. I'm so glad they're zeroing in on it. He continues to double down. You know, Democrats, all the attorneys general were summoned to the White House for this meeting yesterday across the country. I think only a little less than half of them showed up. The Republican ones did. Naturally, the Democrats didn't. Democrats like Keith Ellison of Minnesota, where we know the fraud in Minneapolis is most profound, certainly out there in California as well. Give me 142 here as The vice president reminds us this should not be a political issue when taxpayers are being ripped off. You wouldn't think anyway.
Representatives from the attorney generals in Connecticut and Oregon. And as I've said repeatedly, this should not be a partisan effort. Everybody should care about fraud. Everybody should care about rooting out fraud. Everybody should care about saving the American taxpayers' money. And importantly, everybody should care about actually protecting the programs that only work and are only properly funded if the money funding those programs isn't being stolen by fraudsters. So let me just recap for
everyone should care about fraud, but of course, I guess when you're the one stealing the money, perhaps you care a little less about it being uncovered. Stephen Miller, one of the chief aides to President Trump, has consistently said that fraud alone in this country could top $1 trillion. He thinks we could actually balance the budget if we claw back all the fraud, all the theft of taxpayer dollars. Here's some of what he had to say yesterday in 143.
Thank you. And thank you again to the Vice President for leading this effort, for helming this task force, for bringing us all together here. I think you can all agree that this is the fastest in history that a government task force has traveled from creation to action. Your typical lead time is going to be a year of meetings before anything happens. And that's if you're lucky. And within weeks of this task force being established, we've seen the largest ever slate of indictments, recovered funds, search warrants, raids, seizures, investigations, and new legal actions to stop, disrupt, and prevent fraud. What we've learned, which is not surprising to those of us who spent some time in this area, is that fraud is every bit as bad as President Trump said it was, and even worse. So in other words, everything we found either confirms our worst fears or exceeds them. That's the bad news. The good news is that the best team in government under the leadership of Vice President Vance has been assembled to deal with it. And of course, one of those men who you'll hear from in a second is sitting to my right here, the Associate Attorney General for Fraud Enforcement, Colin McDonald. But before I yield the floor, I do want to just touch on one of the points that Andrew hit on in his remarks. All of the systems in our country, whether you're talking about voting, whether you're talking about entitlements, whether you're talking about welfare benefits, were set up based on the honor system. They're set up based on the idea that you could trust the average person through their own morality to abide by the rules and comply with the law. And so the way most welfare works in most states and most places is we take your word for it. If you fill out a piece of paper and you say your kids are hungry, you are going to get food stamps. We don't check as a country if you even have kids. The fact is basic as that. We don't even check if you even have children. You will just start getting the checks. And so what's happened to our country is we became a society, as we've seen with the Somali refugee problem in Minnesota, where you have a large number of people that are not following the honor system. They're not playing by the rules. They're not abiding by our laws. And the amount that has been fleeced from us is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. I believe, based on what I've seen and what I've heard, is that we could balance the federal budget if the only dollars that went out of the Treasury went to individuals who are properly, lawfully, correctly eligible to receive them. And that ultimately is going to be what we have to do as a country. In the meantime, because of the Vice President's leadership, you are seeing the most muscular, robust, aggressive, dedicated, determined, and speedy effort to shut down criminal fraud that has not only ever occurred in the history of this country, but in any developed nation. So thank you.
That's if those numbers hold, and I have no reason to doubt Mr. Miller, that is a staggering sum of money. I mean, think of that. If all of the fraud is uncovered, the budget is effectively balanced. That's how much they believe is out there to be found. In fact, Brett Baer and the team over there at Fox News, after this confab was over, last night they went through some of the specific numbers. It is jaw-dropping. Brett Baer and their panel were likewise stunned at the very specific numbers that have been uncovered so far. This is just what we know of, by the way, not total that exists out there, just what we know of at present.
Some of these numbers coming out are pretty astonishing. If you look at them, he had a meeting today. These are from the vice president. $22 billion, $1.3 billion deferred back to Treasury Department, $6.3 billion found in suspected fraudulent contracts, $60 million blocked in student aid. They're going state by state. This seems to be an issue that crosses party lines, even though the Democratic AGs didn't show up today.
Yeah, I mean, if Texas politically is a state that Democrats go to burn their money, the United States is the place that taxpayers go to get their money burned. The amount of fraud and waste and misuse in federal program after federal program is sickening. And I'm glad that they're diving into it now. You know, this is what DOGE was originally purposed to do, and DOGE got it started, but it was so disorganized and just so chaotic that I don't think they did a comprehensive good job of doing it. I hope Vice President Vance's task force can get their arms around this and attack this, because this waste, this is criminal, it's fraud, and no American of either party should or does support it.
That's exactly right. From Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary. This administration, not just cracking down on the fraud, but also cracking down on these NGOs, funneling tax money and other funds into their political operations, masked as something else. That's another incredibly important facet of this new Trump term. This also from Fox News yesterday. Hassan Piker names pro-CCP tycoon Singham as the financier of political movements despite their nonprofit veneer. This is also one to keep a sharp eye on out there. Far-left political influencer Hassan Piker identified American Marxist tech tycoon Neville Roy Singham as a major financier between a network of pro-communist U.S. nonprofits who are also engaged in political advocacy and a lot of political movements, marking the first public acknowledgement from a figure inside the far-left network that organizations in the Singham network are operating with an explicitly political agenda. Now, what does this mean? The comment's significant, writes Fox, because congressional investigators and watchdog groups have long argued that nonprofits connected to this guy Singham are functioning as overt political operations while enjoying tax-exempt charitable status. Critics argue that such activity may violate nonprofit tax laws, which place strict limits on amounts of political activity charities can conduct. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Asset Control issued administrative subpoena to Piker and far-left Code Pink for possibly violating sanctions against doing business with the Communist Party of Cuba when they traveled to the island nation in March. And it goes on. There's also a lot, this story is worth reading and understanding, but there are a number of people, and I want to be careful here because I know that there are people in this audience who absolutely hate the words data center. They are convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that everything about data centers and AI are evil and corrupt and going to ruin the landscape and steal people's water and energy. And I understand all of the concerns, and I hear them, and I think communities should be involved in every second of the decision-making process on data centers. I do. Having said all that, it is very interesting that it has been uncovered that there are CCP interests, that is the Communist Party of China interests, that are investing heavily right now in influencer campaigns and subversive media campaigns trying to get American citizens to turn against new tech and data centers and AI generally. And what we know is when President Trump hit the White House door, his first item of business was AI. He believes, and people around him believe, that the AI race, the arms race, who controls AI, the AI basis of information, is going to be a ball game for the future. Now, a lot of Americans just don't feel that. They don't share that point of view. They're suspicious of AI, to put it mildly, and they don't want anything to do with it. The thing is, it's coming. And China will control it if we don't. That's number one. And you and I use the cloud, everything that we do on these devices. It takes power. It takes a lot of it. And these data centers are part of what feeds it. And the more we do online, the more electronic and online we become, the more mobile we become, the more we're going to need power and data centers to supply it and keep it strong. And Communist China wants nothing more than to see us trail them in the development of this stuff. So, I understand all the intellectual arguments. I understand the farmland argument, the resources argument, the utility bills and water argument, the noise, the light pollution. I understand all of those arguments. But I also understand that China, much like coal-fired power plants, they're building them as fast as they can, and they're cheering them. And China would love nothing more than to beat us in this race as well. And the fact that they're spending money trying to convince American people that we should turn against it is to their advantage. And right now, by the way, big tech and, frankly, Washington, D.C., those that are supportive of data centers, the political class in this country is going to have to do a better job explaining to the voter why it's to the community's benefit. I will say that when it comes to data centers, the one thing that a lot of people do not talk about, and I've even talked with some county commissioners who will tell you quietly, they won't say it out loud because they know the public's against it, but quietly they'll say, do you know the kind of revenue that's going to come into our county or our city or our town or whatever if this data center is built? It's a tremendous sum of money. And rural communities in particular that are kind of dying on the vine, from an economic point of view, I think a lot of them would, I'll just say this. I think a lot of them would have to look hard at the bottom line and the revenue that could come pouring into their otherwise broken community and have a really healthy discussion about it. You may say, I don't want our beautiful, pristine farmland interrupted or whatever, and that's fine. I certainly understand that position. But what if it meant annually millions of dollars into your small community to reinvest in your town, your schools, or what have you? Look, I'm not here to settle that debate. I'm just here to let you know that there is an interest in making sure this country turns sour against the development of AI and data centers, and it's the CCP. And a lot of tax dollars are being used, or I should say tax-deferred dollars, hiding as charity, are being used to promote and convince Americans to turn against data centers. It's worth knowing. I'm not here to rule or render judgment on it, and I know people are of wildly divergent views on this subject. It's just important that you know all sides and you have all the information. Meanwhile, at Just the News, the FDA leadership bringing a cultural shift and mentality shakeup. That's never bad. The Food and Drug Administration garnering praise for bringing a heightened focus to efficiency, rare diseases, and food safety under the new acting commissioner, Kyle Diamantis, who's already achieved success as the agency's deputy commissioner for food. He made some great strides forward already in trying to get some of the petroleum-based derivatives out of food. We talked about this earlier. This is an apolitical issue. Democrats and Republicans alike, the MAHA movement is a real thing. People care deeply about it. The culture shift will be required at FDA to achieve large-scale change while bumping up against an entrenched bureaucracy. They talk about an emphasis on food and related products, not just drugs, nutrition and food safety activities, resource allocation, risk prioritization. There's some really interesting stuff going on at FDA right now, and it largely focuses on not just drugs, but our food supply as well. Long overdue. And big food is a real thing that opposes this. It will be important to watch. President Trump not backing away from that at all. And then this, I really wanted to hammer this because I think when it comes to rules and regs that have been impactful on America's economy for the worse, it is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And now that Lee Zeldin heads it and President Trump is president, they have been gutting this agency, and for the better, and we all benefit from it. President Trump and Lee Zeldin announcing the rollback of 2 Biden administration refrigerant rules designed to fight global warming, which nobody believes in and is not a real thing, at least not something we can control. It's certainly not because of refrigerant. An estimated $900 million in savings, mostly from grocery stores whose executives joined the Oval Office announcement, are achieved by setting aside the post-2023 phase-out of industrial fridges that use hydrofluorocarbons. Another $1.5 billion is projected to be saved by granting mass exemptions to roadway refrigeration units. Zeldin said many Americans were expressing a lot of frustration and anger over this rushed, frantic, reckless sprint by the Biden administration to phase out reliable equipment for grocery stores, restaurants, and homes. You wonder why things cost so much at the grocery store, why things are costing more. I mean, when you go out to eat, menus have almost doubled. These refrigerant, you probably didn't even know about it. those giant walk-in freezers and refrigerators that restaurants use, they've been under scrutiny, courtesy of the Biden administration and these made-up eco-wacko laws. And so Trump and Zeldin are taking a hatchet to them. Amen, and God bless them. And then just speaking of Biden quickly, I thought I'd call your attention to this before we wrap today. Biden is suing the Justice Department yesterday. The husk popped up to block the release of recordings and transcripts from interviews he gave to a ghostwriter in his 2017 memoir, which were included in a special counsel probe. The lawsuit comes ahead of the department's planned June 15 release of the materials to the House Judiciary Committee. Heritage Foundation requesting the material after they were used in special counsel Robert Hur's investigation. Hur determined Biden's memory lapses would make it hard to prove he acted willfully. So that'll be fascinating. The Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, trying to hide how bad he sounded in those recordings for his memoir. And if those come out, I think that the Democrat Party, not that we doubt it, but the Democrats will have to explain themselves as to how it is that guy ever became president to begin with. And then we'll have a better understanding also of how Kamala Harris suddenly became the nominee. And this poor old guy never stood a chance. As far as I'm concerned, we watched political elder abuse with that guy. And I think the Democrat Party knows they'd be totally exposed if those recordings were ever made public. Then one last thing, Tulsi Gabbard exited over the weekend, and a lot was to be made of that. The Atlantic thinks this is Tulsi Gabbard taking an exit ramp because of politics or some such thing. Of course, in her resignation letter, Gabbard told Trump she would step down on June 30th after having learned her husband has a rare type of bone cancer. The Atlantic can't resist making it a political rift, even though she literally said, "My husband has bone cancer. I'm going home to be with him." The left still wants to make it disgustingly about politics. That's what I'm talking about. Margaret Brennan crying and weeping. These people have got to get out of the Beltway to understand what human beings are really like, what it is to love someone and care about them more than politics. That is a thing for most Americans. Politics does not supplant your love and affection for your friends and your family and your neighbors, generally. And I think truly only the mentally ill with holes in their souls value politics over everything else. That'll do it for me today, folks, and the Heartlander right here from America's Heartland. I hope you'll stay close. Subscribe to Heartlander News here on YouTube for each new show we do. And I hope you'll give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think about the show and any of the stories that we're covering. We're sure glad to have you along, and we'll see you next time right here on Heartlander News.